And
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Hardware Podcast. My name is Jackson Danner alongside my friend Omar Borja. Omar recently made me depressed because I realized after this week, we're halfway done with the regular season. How did this come so quickly?
I don't know. I mean, it always sneaks up though, which is kind of
Yeah, it
sad.
always sneaks up. It's like, gosh, man, we are halfway done after this as far as we're concerned with college football awards and all that. And who knows, maybe with a little, I don't know if you saw the post from The Rock the other day about him going to this business meeting for the XFL. So maybe we'll do a little spring or something like that. But man, gosh, that flew by. So anyways, yeah, man, how's your week going? Everything? Enjoy your weekend of college football?
Yeah, it wasn't bad. Got a free ticket to the Clemson game from Mr. Vipul Patel, friend of or
Friend of
father
the
of my
show,
friend.
friend of both of us.
Friend of the pod, yeah. A friend of both of us and father of Nikhil Patel. So if he watches this, I don't think he watches our podcast. Just know that we mentioned his name, and I was really grateful for the ticket. And a really close game at Clemson Boston College. A lot of red flags there for Clemson, but maybe they'll figure it by a season's end because they're still alive for the ACC.
Anyone's alive in the ACC right now, except for maybe Florida State and Miami. Yeah, that conference is wide open right now. But hopefully, we'll get to see the ACC develop a little more and be a little more solidified as time goes on. I know we're going to be talking about a particular ACC quarterback today in our Heisman ranking, someone that snuck in there. But anyways, we'll get to that in a little bit. Who has first pick this week? I can't remember for players of the week.
I think I have first pick.
Okay, go ahead.
All right. So my first pick at quarterback, I like to see we're both fans of the East West Shrine Bowl. I attended the game in 2020, last game at the Trop, the aircraft hangar. But we like to see their games of the week and where scouts are on site. And so that's where both my quarterback selections are coming from that page. So this was one of the games of the week, the Battle of the Bay, Norfolk State versus Hampton, great HBCU classic. Not exactly an in-conference rivalry anymore with Hampton leaving the MEAC of the Big South. But big shouts to Juwan Carter, quarterback for Norfolk State, who, along with the Queel Glass, there is a great crop of pro-ready quarterbacks in the HBCUs and the SWAC and the MEAC. Juwan Carter is one of them, really. He went 17 to 31 for 294 yards, 2 touchdowns, had 17 carries for 92 yards and 3 touchdowns for a 5-touchdown day on the season. He has 12 touchdowns, 2 picks, averaging about 5 yards a carry with sacks and 4 rushing touchdowns. And honestly, like people aren't paying attention. Like in terms of the Celebration Bowl race, one of my favorite bowl games. But Norfolk State is projected to go to the bowl game by ESPN by a couple prognosticators, and that would be their first bowl since 1979, the 1979 Gold Bowl against South Carolina State. They've never won a bowl game. They have 4 appearances total in HBCU bowls. If you ask me, I think this is the better bowl train to jump on than the UTEP bowl train. I mean, that's just my hot take. A lot of people were jumping on the UTEP bowl train, but the Norfolk State bowl train on the shore of Virginia, that's a great train to jump on. So that's my pick, Juwan
That
Carter. Yeah, like look for him in the East West Shrine Bowl for sure. I mean, I would love to see him there.
Yeah, absolutely. Hopefully we'll see him down there in Vegas on the NFL Network this January. But man, 3 rushing touchdowns in one game. How many does he have on the year? Do you know that by chance?
Yeah, he's got 4 in the year, but he's just so efficient running the
Okay.
ball. I wish I could get some
Yeah.
non-sack rushing numbers, but he's efficient even with
Yeah.
sacks with
I mean,
five
he
yards.
almost had 100 yards rushing. It doesn't matter how many rushing touchdowns he has. I mean, he's obviously proficient in running the ball, which gosh, that's awesome. My first guy, opposite end of the spectrum, I'm going to go with Will Rogers, a quarterback from Mississippi State, 46 for 59, which is a ridiculous 78% completion percentage, 408 yards, 3 touchdowns, no picks. There's no way you can put up those kind of stats and us not mention you. He got all those in a 26-22 victory versus Texas A&M this past weekend.
Yeah, and like I mean, the thing with Mike Leach's offense is it's a great stat padding offense. but like
I
really,
mean, yes, they are in
yeah,
an air
no,
raid,
yeah.
but still, everyone knows the pass is coming, and 4 out of 5 times almost you're completing the pass. So I thought that was awesome to see.
No, that's a thing. Yeah, like honestly, it's amazing the numbers he's putting out there. And a lot of people probably when Mike Leach was hired probably said, okay, the air raid would not work with the SEC defenses, but I mean, it's working right now with for Mississippi State. Like they're doing pretty well this year after sort of an off year last year. I think they went 4-7 last year. So really great to see.
Um, I think you might have added an extra loss for that brawl at the end of the Armed Forces Bowl right there.
No,
But yeah.
I thought they won the okay. Frankly, I thought they won the brawl. Honestly, like because what I remember wasn't there a Mississippi State guy that are you
Well,
talking about? Are you saying they
maybe the
lost
press
it?
conference afterward then with Mike Leach, because
Okay.
that was an
Yeah,
interesting.
Mike Leach is he's a character to say the least, and I'm just gonna leave it
Yeah.
at that. I'm not gonna get into a controversial character in college football at times. I mean, people have their opinions. I'm indifferent towards it, but I do recognize he's an acquired taste. So I guess moving on from that, we have so my next quarterback was part of a game that had East West Shrine Bowl scouts on site, and that was the Shula Bowl in FAU versus FIU, which probably will end up being the better South Florida rivalry or the best rivalry game in Florida this year. Um, better than
It's
UCF
looking like
USF.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, the Warren F
Yeah.
boards looking like it. But so Nkosi Perry went 18 of 21, a name that I know you remember. Nkosi Perry, Miami, went 18 of 21, 329 yards, 3 touchdowns, had a rushing touchdown, and also threw in a catch in there for FAU. This FAU offense is looking very improved from last year. Last year, all they could do was really run the ball. They struggled. They had they had quarterbacks that managed the game well. Didn't really make plays that much. In Nick Troney and Javante and I think it's not Javante Williams, but I forget his name. But they had two solid quarterbacks. But Nkosi Perry's taking that offense to a new level. They could contend in the East as Marshall is 2-3 right now, much to everyone's surprise.
Yeah, no, they have been doing good. That's been awesome to see. But yeah, hopefully we can see him get. I'm gonna go with sorry, I'm having trouble right here. Okay, there we go. I got Kenny Pickett as my next quarterback from Pitt. 23 for 36, 389 yards and 4 touchdowns. He has 19 touchdowns and 1 interception on the season, which does anyone, that is an incredible ratio. Now he did do this in a blowout win versus Georgia Tech, but I think he's jumping in on our radar, at least because I don't think we've mentioned Kenny on the show before on the pod, but man, he's certainly earned a spot.
Yeah, and you and our friend that does another podcast on our network, the Northeast Bull Rush, John Glowatz. He actually mentioned Kenny Pickett and asked about last night and asked about his Heisman prospects, and I had to do a quick check on his stats. I didn't realize he had 19 touchdowns. I knew Kenny Pickett was experienced. I've been a Kenny Pickett fan since he beat Miami his freshman year, but he's really taken things to a new level. And I think looking at how Georgia Tech their defense performed against Sam Howell and looking at how they performed against Kenny Pickett, I think that's all you need to know really about Kenny Pickett this year. The knock on him isn't really his fault. It's the fact that when we think of Pitt, we think about them running the ball in terms of like James Conner, the other great backs that they had like Kadri Ollison. Like we think about Pitt running the ball. I mean, they're coached by Paul Christ, a former Wisconsin assistant. So I'm hoping he can hop up the Heisman boards because it's been a while since we had like an actual Northeastern Heisman finalist / candidate. So that should be fun to watch.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm trying to think of one. What Manti Te'o? Would you count that?
No, no, no.
No.
I think I think Ray Rice was the last Northeastern player to get votes back in 06.
Okay,
That's what
no.
I'm. Oh no. Sorry, Matt Ryan. Matt Ryan probably got votes in 07, but he wasn't a finalist.
Okay. Yeah.
No. Sorry. And again, Andre Williams in 2013 was a finalist. So that I know is the last one. I know Andre Williams is the
Okay.
very
That's
last one in
definitely
2013.
the most recent. Yeah, because I can't think of any within the past at least 4 or 5 years. So yeah, that's probably the most recent. Moving on to running backs. I'm going to go with a guy staying the obvious, Brian Robinson, running back from Alabama, an incredible 36 carries. That alone should earn him a spot talking about this, 171 yards and 4 touchdowns. Alabama is just the more physical team versus Ole Miss. And Brian Robinson was a large part of that.
Yeah, I agree. And so I'm all for running backs winning the Heisman. I think Brian Robinson is in a great spot to get Heisman attention because he's a Bama running back. A fun or an interesting tidbit is the last 3 non-quarterbacks to win the Heisman were Alabama position players, I shouldn't say position players, but Alabama skill players, as in you had Mark Ingram in 09, you had Derrick Henry in 2015, and then you have Devontae Smith in 2020 at wide receiver. The last non-Alabama skill player to win it was Reggie Bush in 05, which is really crazy to think of. So that just shows you the leg up that he has in the race. So, I mean, yeah, Brian Robinson, great game for sure there. And like you mentioned, like Ole Miss just got out physicaled. I mean, I guess it shows that they're more of a finesse team. I'd hate to use that term, but I can't really find a better term to describe it with Lane Kiffin's offense and everything.
I mean, the first few games of the season with Ole Miss, we were saying like, grab your popcorn, enjoy the show, and then now, yeah, Bama just dominated them, and it was over pretty quickly. You could see. Did you name your running back or no?
I did not yet.
Who's your next one?
My first running back, I got Fred Davis out of Mercer, who it seems like every week, I feel like every week or two, we're mentioning how bad the Sanford defense is and how bad they make things for Liam Welch. Because when I saw the stat line on Twitter for Fred Davis, I'm like, this is insane. He had 28 carries, 276 yards, and 5 touchdowns for an emerging Bears program in the SoCon, and they're playing Sanford. Liam Welch had 312 yards and 4 touchdowns. The game, like both teams had over 40 points, but Mercer ended up winning that one because the Sanford defense just isn't that good. I mean, it's crazy. But yeah, Fred Davis, great game for Mercer. And with this game, an amazing fact, he exceeded his totals from the spring season with this one game. He exceeded his totals by 3 yards in 64 less carries. In the spring season, he had 92 carries for 273 yards. This game, he exceeded those totals with 28 carries for 276 yards. Just amazing. Mercer should be in the thick of the SoCon race as VMI is having a down year. They lost the Military Classic of the South against Citadel this past weekend. So the SoCons is anyone's. The SoCons and as well as the at-large bids that may come from that conference are anyone's to go for. With East Tennessee State leading the pack with Quay Holmes and company there. But really interesting things happening in the SoCon. Fred Davis, great game out there.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that was awesome to see. I don't think that's the first time we've mentioned Davis on here, right?
Yeah, no, because he had not had a 100-yard game to this point. But he burst on the scene.
Yeah, no, it's tough to mention someone with not 100 without a 100-yard game. But yeah, no, that now that he had that, definitely someone we can keep an eye on. I'm gonna go with my next back. I'm gonna go with Tyler Algier. Am I saying that correctly?
Algier, I think it's Algier.
Algier. Yeah, that's right. That's it. Tyler Algier, running back from BYU, 22 attempts, 218 yards. That is almost 10 yards per carry, which is insane. 3 touchdowns, another 3 receptions for 22 yards. He balled out and had a great day for BYU.
Yeah, and I think looking at BYU in the long term, like this is a great sign for them in their New Year's Six prospects because you look at last year, of course, all the attention was on Zach Wilson. But Algier had 150 carries for 1,100 yards, averaging almost 7 yards a carry. So he brought that efficiency and balance to that offense. This is a Tyler Algier, that 2020 team that showed up against Utah State in a hard-fought game, really. He'll definitely lighten the load for the quarterbacks, whether it's Gunnar Romney or Jaron Hall quarterbacking the Cougars in their hard games against Baylor, Virginia, and also USC on Thanksgiving weekend. So he'll hopefully lighten the load, for that offense. But it's good to see Algier back. Seemed like every week he was like in the spotlight on the late night slots for BYU early in the season at least. So for my running backs, I have 2 for the same team. For Georgia State, I got Logan Wright and Jalen White. the W&W company. They combined for 24 carries for 365 yards and 4 touchdowns for Georgia Southern in their win against Arkansas State. And that Georgia Southern offense, they looked like they were firing from all cylinders. 50 carries for 503 yards and 7 touchdowns. And the best part of it all, 3 to 13 passing. That's a Georgia State or Georgia Southern. Excuse me, that's a Georgia Southern we know that gets to bowls and makes things hard. And mentioning BYU, they play BYU at home on November 20th. If this is what the option looks like by then, if it's crispy, if it's fluid, then BYU might be on upset alert for that game.
The thing about the option is that so few teams run it. It's so hard to prepare for, and there's really no way to emulate it in practice, at least at a high level or the level that you're going to face it at. So yeah, that is that's something to watch out for with BYU and Georgia Southern later on in the year. Moving on to receivers. We didn't mention Desmond Ridder. We have to mention Alec Pierce, the wide receiver from Cincinnati. 6 receptions, 144 yards, no touchdowns, but he accounted for nearly half of Ridder's passing yards. He had 297 on the day. 144 of those were Pierce's. And of course, that incredible statement 24-13 win versus Notre Dame that they got paid to go there, by the way. I found that out this week. I just thought this was a little, non-conference home and home. I don't know what I thought it was, but no, that Cincinnati got a paycheck to go.
Yeah, I mean, it should be a home and home. Nippert Stadium is a great venue. Pat McAfee called it on a broadcast, the Wrigley Field of college football. So great stadium. Alec Pierce, I've been an Alec Pierce fan since sitting there with my friends December 19th, 2020. We were watching the AAC title game. It was a fun time. I guess it was sort of like my annual bowl party. Except it wasn't the Bowls Conference Championships, but Alec Pierce seemed to be everywhere on that field and catching jump balls. He's an amazing jump ball receiver, probably one of the best in the country, like second to Drake London, I think. But Alec Pierce has amazing ball skills, and I would love to see him on an NFL team. And I know the Senior Bowl gave him a shout out too with Jim Nagy pulling out. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'll let you take that.
Yeah. No, I have nothing else to add other than, I believe he either was on the watch list or got added to that for the Reese's Senior Bowl. By the way, if you don't follow Jim Nagy, the director for the Senior Bowl on Twitter, you should. Jim Nagy _SB. He always puts awesome stuff on college football, particularly from a scouting perspective. But I know I think you really enjoy his stuff a lot on there. But he's an excellent jump ball receiver, and you don't have to have touchdowns to make an impact. I mean, he had an incredible day.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like, people will ignore the touchdowns, but I think if you find an Alec Pierce highlight reel, like, you will not be disappointed. Just really amazing receiver. For my first receiver, I'm going to go with the opposite end of the spectrum in terms of like college football exposure. I'm going with Nabaziah Burris out of Stetson, who had 7 catches for 127 yards and 4 touchdowns in a close loss to Davidson, the defending champs. I mean, the Pioneer Football League, it's looking fun this year, really, because San Diego, the traditional power, the team that had won over 30 conference games. They had over 30 conference games in a row. I think it was 37. They're 1-4 right now. They're struggling. I mean, the conference is anyone's to take, including Presbyterian, with the coach that never punts. But Burris had a great game out there, and he's only a freshman, so maybe Stetson has some great young talent in the future that they can grab a league title out in the Pioneer Football League.
Yeah, that would be awesome to see. I do not have him on my list, to say the least. I don't have any Stetson players, but what kind of stats has he put up on the year so far?
So he only had 1 catch versus Princeton coming into that game, but he just burst on the scene for 4 touchdowns. Really, really great to see. And gave Davidson a run for their money. Who Davidson's looking like the front runner right now in the Pioneer League.
Anytime you get 4 touchdowns, you should be notated for sure. But going from 1 catch to 4 touchdowns is awesome. But I'm going to go with you might have had him on your list as well. Sky Moore, wide receiver from Western Michigan, 11 receptions, 163 yards, and 2 touchdowns in a 24-17 win versus Buffalo. Sky Moore seems to have had a great year so far. I forgot to write down his stats so far for the rest of the season. But, he put up a win against what is not a terrible Buffalo team either.
Yeah, absolutely not. And that game was a really marquee game in the MAC. Really good testing point, I guess. I mean, you might even see that be the conference championship game. Be the game in
Yeah,
Detroit.
no, it's a realistic outcome, especially with how bad the MAC. Oh gosh, which division is Buffalo in? I think
MAC East.
MAC East. Yeah, especially with how bad the MAC East is right now. Yeah, you could really see that be the conference championship, but we'll see.
Yeah, for sure. And staying in the MAC with our receivers, and staying in Michigan, as in Michigan MAC schools, I got Hassan Beydoun, who had 14 out of Eastern Michigan, had 14 catches for 157 yards, no touchdowns, but he's got 29 catches for 360 yards for Eastern Michigan team that should make a bowl. Throwing the ball out there, it was the guy that actually started the 2019 or 2020 Birmingham Bowl in Ben Bryant. Or actually, no, did he? I don't think he started that game, but he did have plenty of starts in the 2019 Cincinnati team. That team's 3-2 out in Ypsilanti. Should be primed for a bowl, but 14 catches, 157 yards, really like the number one option. An impressive game out there. I think he led all of FBS in catches this past week.
What was his name one more time?
Hassan Beydoun.
Hassan Beydoun. Okay, yeah, no, that's awesome. We'll have to keep an eye on him for the rest of the year. I think we got off track. Do you want to go with your defensive player first?
Yeah. So I got two defensive players for once this week. And something I stumbled across on Twitter. I love the All-Star games. I'm a purist. As a historian, you recognize the significance of All-Star games in the past, where when television wasn't as wide ranging as it is today. The All-Star games were when you'd see everyone. It's when you had the College All-Star Game in Chicago, the Senior Bowl, the East West Shrine Bowl, the Blue Gray Classic on Christmas Day, and the Crampton Bowl. My favorite one to think about. So the NFLPA Bowl, the scouts were out in Missouri Western to watch Sam Webb play, and he didn't have a great game statistically, but it might have just been because he's a lockdown corner. He's got 7 picks in his career, 33 pass deflections, and 15 in 2019. So a lockdown corner for Missouri Western, the Griffins out there. Just wanted to shine light on that because we love talking about the All-Star games on this podcast. Sam Webb, a name to look out for. I mean, might even be a late round sleeper in the drafts, or like that one undrafted guy that makes the team and ends up making a name for himself. Might end up being like the Brett Grimes, if anything, on a team in the future. So
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's awesome to see in the NFLPA Bowl. Anytime you get that sort of spotlight on you, yeah, you should have attention on you. And then also, like you said, ideally, as a corner, you don't have any stats because no one throws the ball your way. So, which I mean, obviously is not always the case, but I think it was Khair Elam this year that said, I'm kind of offended when someone throws the ball or targets the receiver I'm covering, because it means I'm not doing a good enough job of covering if they think they can complete that. So yeah, no, we'll keep an eye on him. I've got Jahari K, defensive end from Sam Houston. I believe we talked a lot about Jahari in spring this past year on the FCS pod. 8 tackles, 2.5 tackles for loss, 1.5 of those being sacks, a forced fumble, and 2 quarterback hurries. He got all that in a 2020 or 21-20 win versus Stephen F. Austin.
then that's the Battle of the Piney Woods at Energy Stadium. A great rivalry that's in the it's in the WAC ASUN Challenge this year, but it's going to be in the WAC next year when the WAC gets full membership. Sam Houston State, people forget, they're the spring champions, I think, really, because it's a spring season, short season. A lot of teams weren't playing. But they're for real. I'm surprised we haven't brought up Eric Schmidt yet in the FCS race. I think it's because Eric Berry's stats this year have been just transcendent. He had another great performance on national TV as the Big Sky had the After Dark game this past weekend against Fontana. Speaking of
On
Eric Berry.
ESPNU, right?
Yeah, on ESPNU. Absolutely great for the conference. But yeah, I think it's surprising we're talking about Sam Houston's defense instead of their offense, because they have numerous weapons on offense. They got Jaquez Ezer too, who in doing a pod with a friend of the network, HBC Dwayne from HBC The Art Sports, I found out he was a Howard transfer. That Howard team was stacked. They had Ezer, they had Kalen Newton, Cam Newton's brother, just a stacked team. But that's a topic for another time. But yeah, great to see Sam Houston State still dominant out there in the WAC now, as the WAC is back. Moving on to my defender. In the spring, we talked a bunch about Drake's defense. Well, not a bunch, but multiple times about how good their defense was. In their first game of the season, they were right in the thick of it with the defending champs, the 4-time defending champs in San Diego. In fact, they found a way to score 10 points despite 25 yards of offense. That's how good the defense was for Drake that day. And they narrowly lost 13-10 to the Toreros. That defense allowed only 13 points a game in 5 games in the spring. Absolutely elite unit. And they showed that again in a 6-3 slosh fest against Butler. The defense was great. And there really wasn't one standout. So I had to pick one. I picked Will Cullick, who had 3 tackles for loss in the 6-3 victory against the Bulldogs. And last time I mentioned Drake, I quoted some Drake lines, so I'm going to do it again. They got no friends in the industry when it comes to the Pioneer Football League. And they was known for snapping when they chat before the app, stood on everything they said, and they never took it back. No friends in the industry, the Pioneer Football League. They had to draw the line between the brothers and their enemies. That's a fact right there. From no friend, no friends in the industry. Drake, not the rapper, but Drake is turning up. The Drake Bulldogs of the Pioneer Football League they're turning up, especially on defense with a great performance this past week.
You're doing the wrong thing on Spotify. You need to be shouldn't be doing podcasts on Spotify. Should be dropping some singles on there, because that was elite, Omar. Good job. Definitely better than I could do. So
got to get a collab with the Miami rapper or the Tennessee rapper that you always show me.
Yeah. There's a Miami one and a Tennessee one. Yeah, you could do that for sure. Oh man. Well, a very smooth transition into our Heisman race. Who have you got as your top 5 right now?
Top 5 right now. I got number 1 being Bryce Young, of course. Why not? Alabama being dominant and him having a great performance, really winning that quarterback battle handily against Matt Corral. Number 2, I'm going to change things up a bit from what I told you before the pod. Bijan Robinson. I got Bijan Robinson at number 2 for Texas with a potentially huge game in the Heisman race against Oklahoma this week in the Red River rivalry. He's got 682 yards in 5 games, averaging 7 yards per carry, and they upped his carry load against TCU. He had 36 carries against the Horned Frogs this past week, so that could be him trending up in the Heisman race. Number 3, I'm going Desmond Ridder after that huge game against Notre Dame. It's just tough when you have a group of 5 quarterback. His numbers are there. He's on a great team. All recipes for being great in the Heisman race, but it's Cincinnati. He's in the group of 5. There'll be some lesser. I mean, there'll be some less opportune spots for him, like this Friday against Temple. I'm not sure how many people will be watching a Friday night game against Temple. No knock on them. It's people focus more on the Saturday games and the Friday games. So I got Desmond Ridder at 3. 4, I got Kenny Pickett. We're going to talk a little. I mean, we talked about him before. We might talk about him a little bit more after you release your rankings, but he's quietly having a great year. I think we have to see more from Pitt in the ACC race because I think Pitt is the best team in the Coastal. I think they win that division. The offense is just different this year. They're passing the ball a lot more, and Kenny Pickett's experienced, and it feels special. It really does. 5th-year starter. Feels like the year that he finally does it and finally breaks the hump and wins it, wins the ACC title. And then for number 5, I'm going with Kenneth Walker. I'm going to go with Kenneth Walker there. He's got similar numbers to Bijan Robinson, but it's one of those things where we have to see more out of him, I think. There haven't really been any marquee games for Michigan State. Once they play, because they got Penn State, they got Michigan, they got Ohio State. Once we see how he plays in those 3 games, we might be talking about Kenneth Walker instead of Bijan Robinson as the top running back in the Heisman race.
Yeah, no, we very well might be. There's Brian Robinson, and there's John Robinson. So very similar names, but both have had an excellent season. My list looks pretty similar. Jake Haener broke our hearts last week. The 1 week we didn't want Hawaii to win versus Fresno State. I would have loved to keep Jake in there. With the loss to Hawaii, you cannot be in my Heisman list. That is just one of my rules, I guess. So I have Bryce Young first. Obviously, after that dominant performance over Matt Corral. Matt Corral dropped completely off of my list after last week because last week may not have been his Heisman moment. You can't have an anti-Heisman moment. That was awful on all cylinders by Ole Miss. Desmond Ridder is my second. He definitely had his Heisman moment. So I put Desmond Ridder up there at 2. But John Robinson, running back from Texas, at number 3 for the season that he's had, and it being such a big name program like Texas. He has an opportunity to showcase in the Red River Showdown, or whatever, the Red River Rivalry, whatever they call it up there in Dallas. I had CJ Stroud at 4. And that partially is because it's such a big program. I mean, that's pretty much is the main reason that I have him there. And so I think he's like maybe the 4th most likely to win it. One, fans weren't chanting his backup's name in the crowd, so I wouldn't have Spencer Rattler in there. But with CJ Stroud, again, I think I said this last week too, nothing that's really wowed me, but I'm keeping him in there for the same reason I kept Ridder in there for a little bit, because he still has the chance. We just haven't seen it yet for him to wow us. So I'm going to put there. And like you have Kenny Pickett at number 5, quarterback from Pitt. Like you said, it does feel special for this year and for Pickett.
And I think the thing is like we have a wide variety of candidates. We got our skill position players. We have our players who like from schools that don't normally produce Heisman finalists. It seems like a very interesting Heisman race, but it does seem like Bryce Young's to lose at this point. But again, we're just almost at the halfway point. Will be interesting to see. And a lot of guys got knocked off. I mean, this past week, or not a lot, but a few guys. I know some people might add KJ Jefferson if he had a strong performance against Georgia this past weekend. That didn't happen. So yeah, we'll just see. Like these big games as they happen will dwindle the race smaller and smaller each week.
There's a lot of football left to be played. So there's a lot to happen, a lot of chances for guys and teams to fall, and a lot for them to rise up. So we'll see. I do, before we get into later on in the season and get close to the Heisman, I would love to do a little bit more research on Heisman voting and exactly how that's done, because I think that might shape our lists a little bit. Because if we were doing 5 most deserving in our opinions and 5 most likely, I'd try and find that sweet spot on my list. But gosh, those are 2 totally different lists aside from maybe Bryce Young. Those are 2 different lists. So, but as we get closer, maybe we can start make that distinction a little bit better. Moving on in games to watch for week 6. Like I said, it's still hard to believe that it's week 6. Do you want to do your first one, or do you want?
I'll start because I got a Friday game. Because I got Morgan State Howard. And that's
game.
Well, no, it's Friday. Surprisingly, I thought it was Thursday at first. With you got the HBCU games and ESPNU. Morgan State Howard, great game in the Mid Atlantic. Both teams are struggling right now, with Morgan State at 0-4, Howard at 1-4. But quite literally, like both teams are still alive for the Celebration Bowl. With the MEAC being at 6 teams, it's interesting because this bowl race, it's a 5-game season. Like it doesn't really matter what you did non-conference, like all the stuff that Juwan Carter and Norfolk State did non-conference, that's great and all, but all that matters is the 5 games in MEAC play, and this is a great game. I think it's the first conference game of the season for the MEAC on this Friday night. Should be fun one to tune into. Quentin Williams, watched him during the Truth and Service Classic out in DC. I wasn't at DC, of course, but the game was played in DC on NBC Sports Network. Having a solid year, leading all MEAC passers in passing with 1,113 yards, 8 touchdowns, 4 picks. Guy to watch there. But again, it should be interesting because one of these teams can turn around their season and end up in the Celebration Bowl with, maybe like a 6-5 record, or like even a 5-6 record. I don't know if that's possible, but again, the MEAC is probably going to be the most interesting conference race in Division I, in my opinion, FBS or FCS.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. In that game, not Thursday, Friday, will definitely shape in it. What network is it on again?
Sorry, that's on ESPNU. They usually have the weeknight HBCU games. They have an amazing broadcast team I love, of Tiffany Walker on play-by-play and Jay Skywalker, or Tiffany Green on play-by-play. Excuse me, it's Tiffany Green on play-by-play and Jay Skywalker, former Howard great, doing the color analysis.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I have not seen that broadcast. So I'll have to watch that this Friday. Thursday night, why on earth would you watch Rams Seahawks in that NFC West battle when you can watch Houston at Tulane on ESPN Thursday night? Now hear me out. Houston's 4-1, Tulane's 1-4. It doesn't look good on paper. Tulane's been disappointing. There's no other way about it. We had high hopes for them this year, but their defense is honestly the main issue. They rank 220th or worse in every major defensive category except for third down defense. Their offense, however, is a top 35 scoring offense. Michael Pratt has been throwing the ball well. He just has 9 giveaways on the season. So that has to come to a stop for Pratt to improve. Only 5 interceptions, but he's had 4 fumbles on the year too. Houston's only loss is to Texas Tech in week 1, and 3 of their 4 wins have come by 35 points or more. So they clearly are an explosive offense, and lost to a decent Texas Tech team. And that's obviously a Power 5 school. Tulane, no other word for disappointing. I really hope they can get this turned around, and this is the game to do it at home on ESPN at night. I think this might be a chance for Tulane to start getting it turned around.
I mean, they need to. It didn't look too promising last week against East Carolina. It is a must-win in terms of their bowl aspirations. Do they pull it off? I'm not so sure. Houston looks like a strong program this year.
I don't think Tulane wins. I hope we can see some improvement. And remember, Pratt is a freshman still. Like, we shouldn't be putting this much pressure on him in his freshman year. He's just kind of got thrown out there. But man, I don't think they're going to a bowl this year. But hopefully we can see just some improvement, something to build off of,
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to note this is Mike Pratt's second freshman year with the weird eligibility rules.
Yeah.
I mean, so I guess thrown out there would be kind of a stretch because he shined last year. But I see your point for sure. It's just tough because they really challenge themselves in non-conference play. And I mean, even right down to like the group of 5 teams they played. I mean, they played UAB. Like, UAB has been a solid team in Conference USA for a while, which I guess is a smooth transition to my next game to watch. UTSA versus Western Kentucky. And Bailey Zappi's had an amazing year for Western Kentucky so far. I think he threw over 60 passes against Michigan State. Yeah, he went 46 of 64 for 488 yards against Michigan State this past week. Bailey Zappi, if you don't know of him, like, you've had your chances to know about Bailey Zappi. Like, he had almost 1,600 yards in 4 games for Houston Baptist during the fall, and they almost beat a couple of FBS teams. So I mean, so that was your opportunity now. I mean, that was your opportunity against UTSA, a 5-0 UTSA team with Sincere McCormick, Frank Harris, one of the best dual threats in the group of 5, a star-studded UTSA team. And Vegas knows, I guess, they know about Zappy because Western Kentucky is a 3.5 point favorite despite being 1-3. But honestly, if there's ever an indictment for why teams should leave Conference USA, the game of the week in the conference, probably what's going to end up being the game of the year in the conference, probably that's going to be the matchup for the conference title game, is on Stadium. It's on syndication. It's not on cable. It's not on a national cable provider. I mean, it's easy to access. I will give you that. But in terms of exposure, you want your marquee games on marquee networks. This one's on Stadium. It's not even on CBS Sports Network. It's a frustrating indictment for everything that Conference USA is right now. Like, that's just all I have to say.
If you're Conference USA and you can't get your biggest game on CBSSN, then what are you doing? Yeah. Anyways, my next game, I'm going to go with one that I think you definitely have this one on your list, Omar. Arkansas and Ole Miss, noon Eastern on ESPN. Both are coming off of bad in-conference losses to Georgia and Alabama, respectively. I think we'll know a lot more about the depth of the SEC and particularly the SEC West in general after this game. Both teams got punched in the face last week pretty badly. And we'll see. And now that's Georgia and Alabama, the clear-cut 2 best teams in the country. So it's understandable. But I'm really curious who can pull off a win in this game after you both got beaten so badly. Because it's pretty unusual to have 2 undefeated teams lose by a large margin to the number 1 and 2 ranked teams. I can't remember really a circumstance like this where you still have a lot to play for and it's just a very similar story for both of them. And now they play each other. So I'm really interested to see how this one plays out.
Yeah, and I think on that note too, I think it's a near 6 elimination game. The loser of this one might be destined.
Absolutely, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, the loser of this one might be destined to either the Outback or the Citrus Bowl in the
Yeah.
long run. So there's that too.
Especially if Georgia and Bama somehow both go to the playoff, which I mean, who knows? We might see that. Especially if both go in undefeated and then one, beats. You can see a 1 and a 3, or them being the undefeated SEC champion being the one and the other the runner up being the third. I mean, we've seen it before in 2017, whatever that year was, that they both went. But yeah, we can see that. So yeah, this would definitely be a New Year's 6 elimination game.
Absolutely. I mean, so it'll be interesting to see whether Matt Corral bounces back, and I don't know if he gets back in the Heisman race, to be honest with you, but I will see. And also, I kind of feel the need to say this, but I guess when we produce our games of the week, yes, there's games on the schedule like Iowa, Penn State, but who isn't following that one 3 versus 4? I guess we want to shine light on games that are interesting in like award races as well, because I realize I haven't like named a lot of those games over the course of the season. It's not because I'm oblivious to it. It's because I realize a lot of people are probably watching those games as it is. So just got to shine light on the other ones. Excuse me. My next game is a game that our friend of the pod, Rich Waltz, will be calling Wyoming versus Air Force. Wyoming at 4-0, Air Force at 4-1. A huge game in the Mountain West Mountain, especially the fact that Boise State's at 2-3, and Boise State could realistically end at 7-5 or even 6-6 with the schedule that they have left. So, I mean, an interesting game for sure. Hazik Daniels is managing that triple option so well out in Colorado Springs. They got their fullback is having a great year. Brad Roberts, 117 carries for 540 yards, including a 29 carry performance for 142 yards against UNM. So really a huge game out in the Mountain West. And I gotta say, I think it's kind of refreshing to see a Mountain West race not have Boise State. And it's no hate for Boise State. It's just that parity is great in any conference. Like it gets tiresome having the same teams at the top. Having like Wyoming, this feels like 2016, honestly, with Wyoming pulling the upset against Boise State. And they haven't played Boise State yet, but just having that parity in the Mountain West Mountain Division, it's great to see it. We could have Air Force making their first conference championship game since 2015. We could have Wyoming making their first title game since 2016. Heck, even Utah State is looking strong and is in the race and could make their first title game appearance since 2013. This is a beautiful time for the Mountain West, and this game just shows it. 7 o'clock, CBS Sports Network on the call. Rich Walt at the Air Force Academy. How much more American can you get?
I don't think you can. Maybe we have to have Rich on again to rehash that game. That would be awesome. But yeah, no, I love hearing him call games. That was awesome to see. But yeah, we'll have to watch that this night. Man, after you saying that about shedding light on, I feel bad about my last 2 games that I have. I have West Virginia at Baylor next. West Virginia, a 2-3 team, they are 13 points away from being 5-0. They've got 3 very close losses. Baylor, surprisingly, was just not the more physical team with how good their offensive line was. They just had a bad loss to Oklahoma State. And yes, it came out to only, I think it was a 10-point loss, but it was worse than that. If they have any shot at the Big 12 championship, they need to get back on track and win this one.
I mean, the Big 12 is really interesting now because I feel like they're sort of written off Oklahoma. Well, people, I guess not written off, but they see Oklahoma as being vulnerable this year. Oklahoma State looks solid. So we'll see if Bedlam is going to be a game to watch in the Big 12. But Baylor might just, with a loss, like they could creep back up in the conference race because they do have the conference championship game. It is the top 2 finishers in the conference. So they are not dead by any stretch of the imagination. I do anticipate Oklahoma State or Oklahoma tripping up along the way. Even though Oklahoma State would have the tiebreaker over Baylor in terms of conference title game. So yeah, very, very interesting game for sure. And I didn't know that about West Virginia being 15 points away from being 5-0. Like that's interesting. I mean, the best 2-3 team in the country, I guess you can say. So for my next game, excuse me, I'm gonna go with shoot, I just had it here. and I had doubts about it. I'm going to go with ULM versus Georgia State in terms of the bowl race because Georgia State, of course, had that emotional high slash low, whatever you want to call it. Just a really, kind of a game of burnout, honestly, against Auburn a couple weeks ago. I'm not sure if they had a bye week. They did not have a bye week. They lost to App State, but this team was a team that people thought could challenge for the Sun Belt. They're 1-4 right now. They're in danger of missing a bowl. If they lose this game, they're in danger of missing one. ULM is 2-2. They've made it into some bowl projections. The Hawaii Bowl in particular on ESPN, they have them replacing an American team there. This could be huge for their bowl hopes because if they beat Georgia State, they have winnable games against South Alabama, Texas State, and Arkansas State to get to 6 wins. So maybe this is just a huge game for the Sun Belt bowl race, and for ULM's bowl race in particular. ULM's made one bowl, and that was in 2012, and that was a team that beat Arkansas on the road, that almost beat Auburn and almost beat Baylor. So if you're interested in the Group of 5 bowl race and want a bowl team to root for, along with UTEP and Norfolk State, then root for Louisiana Monroe.
Yeah, absolutely. That's going to be something to watch. And then again, my last one, opposite end of the spectrum, Penn State and Iowa. This one I kind of picked because we talked on Bowls with Booze, which if you haven't heard is our Monday night halftime show that we do on Instagram Live. Just kind of talking about bowl projections and all of that. But anyways, I picked this one because we talked about, will the winner of the Big Ten go to the playoff, and who has a shot? And man, this would be a statement win for either of these schools. So I'm looking forward to watching that one. But yeah, sorry about keeping it mostly in the Power 5, except for my Thursday night game. But man, there's so much going on. This speaks to the depth of how many games there are this week.
Absolutely. There's so much depth in the games. And like I got 2 games that I'll just say together. Wake Forest Syracuse at 3:30 on ESPN2. That one's interesting because we know how tough of a place it is to play in the Carrier Dome. You think about Clemson, Syracuse 2017. North Carolina State got upset in the Carrier Dome in 2018 against that great Syracuse team. I kind of got a funny feeling about this one, to be honest with you. I'm not going to go full overboard and say it's going to be an upset, but I wouldn't be surprised if Wake Forest has trouble in the Carrier Dome against Syracuse. I would not be surprised at all. They're only a 6-point favorite. The over/under is kind of low for how Wake Forest plays, averaging 38.4 points per game, but the over/under is at 57. So I got a funny feeling about that one. That one will definitely be something to watch out for, especially with Wake Forest being a front runner in the ACC. And then my last game, I have Utah USC on Fox at 8:00 because the Pac-12 is almost really anyone's to win, at least on the south side of things, because UCLA has looked weak. Well, I won't say weak, but UCLA, they have a loss in conference. They have the loss to Fresno State. Arizona State lost to BYU. They look like the front runner now in the Pac-12 South. And then also too, like USC might still be alive. Utah has time to turn things around. So seeing that primetime game seeing that game in primetime on Fox, it'll be great. It'll be a great mark to see where the Pac-12 is at. I don't think Utah has beat USC in a very long time, and I'm looking that up right now on Wikipedia as it loads. Let's see. Utah has played USC a total of, okay, that's great, Wikipedia. Utah has played USC a total of, let's compare. They played a total of 19 times, and Utah has not won since 28. Okay, that's something else. I think they haven't won at the Coliseum in a long time, and that game's at the Coliseum, so yeah, Utah has not beat USC in LA since 1916. So that'll be something to watch out for. They have not beat them since the Woodrow Wilson administration, since they're bringing up presidential administrations. So definitely something to look out for on primetime on Fox.
Yeah, no, that'll be awesome to see. And yeah, it's the Pac-12 is interesting. The Stanford win makes a lot of things really interesting in that conference, but we'll see. I mean, that was Penn State, Iowa was my last game to watch. You got anything else to add before we head off?
No, I think who would have thought that one of the defining games in the Big Ten playoff race would be Penn State, Iowa in the middle of the year? Like, who would
Yeah,
have thought that? And
no
it's
one thought
almost,
that.
yeah, it's almost
No one.
always a good game too. Like, I don't know if you remember
Yeah.
2017 Saquon's game-winning touchdown. Um, and then in the late 2000s, like, Iowa pulled off a couple upsets against Penn State and knocked them out of the national title race. Like, it is almost always a good game, and I'm excited for it. It's in a funny spot though at 4 o'clock since it's not the big noon game. I'm trying
Yeah,
to.
it is
What is the big
odd.
noon game?
Is it Texas, Oklahoma?
No, that's on ABC. The Fox's noon game is Maryland to Ohio State. I think that might have been a prearranged agreement. Honestly, I think
Yeah, that's odd.
what I think happened. I think Penn State Iowa might have been a homecoming game or something. That's why it's
Yeah,
at 4 o'clock
maybe so.
earlier in the afternoon.
Maybe
So
so.
yeah, it's interesting for sure. But that one surprising, but that's what the season is. It's a surprising season.
Yeah, it is. It is for sure. At least it's surprising and not just weird like last year.
Oh,
So
absolutely,
yeah,
absolutely.
yeah. So yeah, man. Well, that's it for me. But enjoy your weekend at college football, and we'll do this again next week.
Yeah, exactly. I'm excited for it. I mean, love it. The award races are fun. College football is fun. College football is for everyone. So just tune in on this weekend. All right, and with that, I guess it's peace, love, and soul.